Welcome everyone to Male Fuzz TV. I am Peter and today I'm going to be talking about The Boys Season 5 Episodes 1 and 2. The first one's called 15 Inches of Sheer Dynamite and the second is called Teenage Kix. So spoilers for the episodes as always. And it is the final season of The Boys. It's always fun getting to a final season because there's this kind of level of like, well, it's the end, so anyone can die now. They can pull big moves that they would never have done earlier on. Like, you knew they couldn't do this or that earlier on, but when you're near the end, when you're in the final season, especially when you get to the last couple of episodes, it's like, oh no, all bets are off. Like, they can choose to do anything to wrap things up now. So, a little bit of that manic energy, which is nice. And we do have a character death by the end of episode 1, which, it works quite well. It's a little bit obvious it's about to happen just because it kind of does this bookend thing with the character, and that character being A-Train, where he, makes a big heroic choice to help everyone out and save them, but is able to, basically because Homelander now sees him, he chases him, he flies at him as he's running at super speed. And it's actually the choice to not run into an innocent woman that leads to him crashing and then being killed by Homelander, which is obviously a good bookend with how his character started back in the first episode of the show where he killed Huey's girlfriend by running into her. So it was a really nice kind of, bookend in that sense. And of course, this idea of him being like, I'm not scared of you, even if you're about to kill me, was a nice, the only people who are not scared of Homelander in these two episodes are the ones that are willing to die to stop him and spite him. When all Homelander wants is people to be loyal, and he's like annoyed that people's heartbeats are racing when they're around him, even the people who are supposed to like him. And he's realizing that everyone's scared of him, but the only people who aren't scared of him are the ones who want to stop him more than anyone else. So it's a nice thing. Anyway, so one of the problems that The Boys has had in some of its seasons is the opening 2 or 3 episodes, often pacing wise, can be a little bit lackluster, and then things usually kick into gear about episode 4. That's been a thing in several seasons. Even some of my favorite seasons of the show, 2 and 3, I think, have that kind of structure. I think this kind of circumvent it a little bit, at least with episode 1. I think episode 1's a really good focused episode, where it's all about getting the prisoners out of the camp, and they start talking about that, and I was worried that, is this going to be 3 episodes before they actually go and do this? No, it happens by the end of episode 1. Like, they set stuff up, they pay it off, and it feels like we get a full meal in that first episode. Episode 2 is maybe a little bit more lackluster pacing-wise, and it maybe does feel like what I was expecting from the early episodes. I'm not worried by any stretch, because it just kind of feels like normal for this point, for The Boys to have this kind of pacing in the first half of the season. But there's good stuff that happens. There's big character moments. There's more of the big absurdity to enjoy. I'm not going to talk about everything in these 2 episodes. I think that would be, 1, it would be difficult, and 2, I'd be here for ages. So talking about the big points here is the episode 1's about Homelander and his various people want to lure out Butcher and Starlight by threatening, or not even threatening, they're going to execute Huey and MM and Frenchie, who are in the camps. And we see them in the camps, and we see how that place has been run, and they're all forced to wear Homelander merch. It's kind of weird, but fitting, bizarrely. And they're going to kill them to lure everyone else, and the others kind of team up, where Butcher goes to Kimiko, and they do a little thing here where they kind of pretend Kimiko still can't speak because she just doesn't want to talk to Butcher. But as soon as Butcher takes them to Starlight, to Annie, she immediately starts speaking and saying things like "you smell really bad" and whatnot. And it's funny. It is kind of almost a novelty to hear her speak so much, because she has been silent for the entire show up until this point. So, barring the one scream, of course, at the end of season 4, but that was the lead-in to this. So, that's been kind of nice. I will say though, just to sort of fast forward to all of her stuff with Frenchie. Obviously, there's some amusement from them kissing when she's missing the bottom half of her body and things like that. But I will say that once they get together, as sweet as it maybe is initially, it kind of feels like in the second episode in particular that I'm like, okay, I'm certain at least one of you two are dying now, by the end of the season. Maybe both of you, because you're being far too happy. And maybe that's a little too telegraphed in some ways because they're being far too happy. And, you know, Frenchie even wants to run away in episode 2. And she's like, no, we have to stay and help this fight and so on. But I liked some of their moments, even if it's not the most compelling of the bunch as far as the plot lines goes. So you've got that going. The actual prison escape is fun enough. There's a lot of good things in there that I quite liked. I love that their attempted escape doesn't go to plan because Homelander's just expecting it and shows up. And my favorite moment of that is something that I never even thought about, which is stands for mother's milk. And I didn't know that. Like, that wasn't like new information to me, but I'd never really connected that in my head to Homelander's whole milk thing. So when Butcher walks in and Homelander's got them all tied up and he's like, oh, you never told me you had a friend named Mother's Milk, and then he licks his lips like a creep. That legitimately was a laugh for me because I did not see it coming, and it was like, oh yeah, that's such a weird connection that could have been made that I never even really thought about. So, you know, fair enough, credit where credit's due for that. And Annie's flying around a lot more now. You know, she's straight up just flying with her starlight powers. And we're seeing that. Obviously, things look quite bad, but that's when A-Train shows up, despite the fact that he had previously said, no, I can't go into the camp. I have to protect my family, and so on and so on. So, you know, they set up, he refuses to answer the call and then answers the call. He has one heart-to-heart with his brother and one kind of scene with the Deep, where the Deep's just been the worst. You know, the Deep's got a goddamn podcast where he's talking about beta males and all sorts of awful stuff, but he's also selling like a weird like anal massage thing. There's like a visual of him at one point where his legs up in the air and he's got this thing sort of like sunbathing his crotch. I don't know what was going on. It was it was a whole thing. It's just the boys being the boys at this point for some of that stuff. But you know, we see that the big thing here is that Homelander is in power now, right? He controls the president. Ashley's now the vice president. She has her powers now, which is obviously new. They set up in episode 1 that it's telepathy, and she's doing the press briefing at the White House. But then in episode 2, we start hearing the voice that's in her head, which sounds like her voice. But the reveal by the end of the episode is that underneath her wig, there's actually a second face on the back of her head. She's basically grown a twin in the back of her head who's talking to her. Now, the telepathy does seem to be a real thing. Like, she is psychic, but like as she puts it, her tumor is psychic. So, you know, we'll see where that goes. But Ashley's still very much like under the thumb of Homelander in that fear. She tries to sort of convince Sister Sage to kind of help at one point. And Sister Sage is still putting up with all Homelander's stupid decisions, like thawing out his father, Soldier Boy, for example. They kind of sell this idea at the start of episode 1 where Starlight's in disguise as one of the cheerleader firecrackers, who basically they want to play that plane footage right from season 1, like the whole he let a plane full of people die and even threatened them, and they play that behind him on the stage when he's doing his propaganda speech to the Vought shareholders of all people. And even they stop cheering when they see this footage. And there's just this moment where his eyes light up and you realize his solution to this is to kill everyone in the room who's seen the footage. And Sister Sage just leans in with the hand. This is kind of her reveal of being there. And she's like, no, just don't do it. And he listens to her. So he is still listening to her. And the whole idea here is that she is going to be like, no, we can spin this. We can say this is AI. This is a deep fake. This is that. And he even goes on the Firecracker show and is talking about how, look at that, pause it right here, look at that, I've got 7 fingers. That's absurd. I don't have 7 fingers. So, you know, it's using stuff that very much is coming up a lot, and there's a lot of parallels to the real world. Some of them are just kind of, like, sadly, like they've become more real in the real world since The Boys started. In fact, there was even a comment from Kripke who says that all the scripts for season 5 were written before the 2024 election, and he's like almost sad about that because like some of the stuff that's happened since like it just like the things would have maybe changed had they known where things were actually going. So but you can feel parallels. You could, especially this whole idea that Homelander, hates that not everyone loves him. Like, it's all about his ego. It's all about wanting to be loved. And Sister Sage is like, hey, like, like the Democrats up to like 97%. There's this, there's that. Like, we can spin this. This is meaningless, and we've got everything we want. But he's still butthurt. He's like, no. I want everyone to love me, to be loyal to me, to care about me. Like, he can't let it go. So he makes decisions based on how he feels rather than what is right. Even from like a sort of evil dictatorship point of view, like what is right for control to be maintained, he's still making choices that sort of contradict with that just based on how he feels, because he's really just a child. And that's kind of what A-Train effectively says to him right before he gets killed. He's like, yeah, you're just like a pathetic loser. Like, that's all you are. If you take away your powers, you're nothing. You're absolutely nothing. And that's, A-Train's kind of like become kind of a hero by trying to actually help his family, by helping the others, and so on and so on. Whereas Homelander, like, if you take away his powers, what is he? What does he have left at that point? And maybe that's what'll happen. Maybe that's ultimately the comeuppance he'll get, is he'll have to live without powers in a jail cell, and that'll be maybe that's more satisfying than seeing him finally die, perhaps, for the end of the show. But maybe not as bombastic. Maybe they'll want to do something more ridiculous, of course. So yeah, I mean, I had a good time. Obviously, it's got some of that ridiculous stuff with the mole guy who eats his way through the dirt and all that stuff. And there's jokes to be had. I liked Kimiko making fun of Butcher and saying, all you say is oi, oi, oi. I can't say the next part, but, Butcher's favourite word. Over and over again. And, I mean, I'm quite fond of the word as well myself, so I got a good chuckle out of it. Also, he goes to visit his dad, does Butcher, and seemingly the way it ends the scene, he's killed him. So, yeah, he's like... he seems kind of like Butcher, but there was a lot of talk at the end of season 4 about like how, this dark side personality's taken over, so the Butcher that actually really cares about Huey, for example, isn't really the Butcher we've got right now. Now, how much of that is actually a separate personality? How much of that is like he's been turned, kind of, right? It's a bit unclear, and like, well, that like sort of more, not squeaky clean, cuddly Butcher. It's not like he was ever that, but will that more better version of Butcher somehow resuscitate by the end of the show for goodbyes, or, because I don't think Butcher's going to live. I think he's going to die in the finale. I think it's the most obvious thing ever is that he is dying in that finale. Probably him and Homelander together in a blaze of apocalyptic glory, I would expect. But, it's interesting to see if we can get to that point. But right now, he's just flat out killing his father. He's willing to let people die. He is complete and utterly in asshole mode. is kind of in his worst case scenario in a lot of ways. He's like, he's not the one giving the pep talks anymore. He's the one drinking booze. He's the one who has no hope for most of episode 1, and even a good bit of episode 2. Frenchie seems to have cleaned his act up. He's still selling drugs to people in the camp, but he doesn't seem to be using them himself. And otherwise, although does help out the Teen Titan character, who's a bit more innocent in episode 2. They call them the Teen Kix, right? The Teenage Kix, but they're basically this show's version of the Teen Titans, and they live in a TikTok house, which, sure, great. Like, I get it. And it's actually one of them who they want to test the virus on, because that's still the plot here, is the virus that can wipe out all the soups, and the debate over whether they should use it or not. Obviously, Huey doesn't want to. Starlight seems to be ready to die. She's like, oh no, like I have led like all these like Starlight cells behind me, and they all keep getting raided and thrown in prison camps or being killed. Which also is when we get a small reference to the characters from Gen V. They bring up that Marie's leading her team somewhere in another city. I do think we'll see them by the end of the show. I think they'll get a cameo at the very least, and show up to help in a fight or something, maybe in the finale or soon before that. But for now, it's like, okay, yeah, they're out there just doing other kind of resistance-y stuff for the moment, and we can leave it there. Speaking of things going on, I want to mention Black Noir. I think we've got a mole inside Vought and inside the Seven, because Black Noir, who's not the original Black Noir, obviously, the one that we've had can speak, but he refuses to speak when the Deep asks him to speak. which makes it feel like it's setting up that it's actually someone else pretending to be that second Black Noir, and we actually have a third Black Noir who might actually be another character, someone who, because someone who, I mean, he does kill the guard when he goes to fight Starlight at the start of episode 1. That's assuming the switch hasn't happened yet. Maybe that was Black Noir 2 in that scene, and then after that, they get switched around with someone. I don't know. But that would be my assumption at this point. But yeah, the big thing in episode 2 is that Homelander wakes up Soldier Boy feeling like no one gets him. He wants someone who can understand him, and he thinks Soldier Boy might be that. He also sends Soldier Boy to go and find all the characters, Butcher mainly, and does not warn him about the virus that could kill him potentially. So like it's a whole thing where it's like, oh, are you using him as a guinea pig to protect yourself? And maybe that's what Soldier Boy will think, because yeah, we do get scenes of Soldier Boy interacting with Billy and the others, and he does end up in the room when they test the virus, and they put the gas masks on and all that, and it's all fairly well done stuff. And it does seem like he dies. I mean, certainly the volcano guy who spits out lava, although I think they say it's his hot cum, which whatever, but he's got lava. And the other teenage character, like, they die, and it seems like Soldier Boy dies. Of course, the ending to the episode is him sitting back up. So maybe there's resistance because it's an older version of Compound V that he got, perhaps, or maybe the power levels at play here, because he's powerful enough he was able to kind of like withstand it and get back up. I don't know. But he probably will blame Homelander for almost dying and the pain that he went through, and at the very least for neglecting to mention what was actually at stake here. So probably some conflict between them next episode. But it's I think that stuff was fairly well done. Like the second episode had some good stuff in the back half for sure. Like I liked all that stuff kind of coalescing, and it felt like it was ramping up nicely. But definitely in the first half, when it was jumping around a lot of characters, and it was like, okay, Huey and Starlight are happy to be together again. They're going to have sex, but they're not going to talk about their feelings. She feels too guilty about everything she's done in the last year, and he just kind of gets it and is like, I'm not going to give up on you. Even if you think you don't deserve it, I'm not going to give up on you. And it's like, okay, sweet enough, but is what it is. So I guess I should talk about She-Line, which is the Teen Titan character who wears the cat outfit, but apparently does cough up hairballs and uses a litter tray. That's something that MM sees. Also, MM killed Love Sausage, strangled him with his own penis, which, it's kind of a payoff thing. They obviously established that he has a particular dislike and kind of rivalry with Love Sausage, and yeah, it makes sense to give this kind of sense of closure to it. I liked it as a running gag. I don't know if I cared about it that much as something to actually get a big fight scene out of, so I wasn't necessarily that enthused by it as it was playing out. It was fine. But like I wasn't like, oh, this is a great, payoff to this thing they've set up for the last 2 seasons or however long it's been since the Love Sausage stuff was introduced. But perfectly fine. So yeah, and there's a lot of stuff with Homeland. For some reason, there's a lot of Taco Bell talk at one point. Sister Sage is getting some Taco Bell and is talking about every item on the menu she ordered, and I'm like, damn, I hope Taco Bell paid handsomely for this, because they got a lot of ad time here through that scene of dialogue between Sister Sage and Ashley. So definitely worth mentioning that. Otherwise, maybe it's a critique. Maybe there's a little bit of a critique here that this was 2 full hours of The Boys, and I don't necessarily have that much that I want to talk about necessarily. The whole scene with Frenchie and Kimiko, and he's like, let's go away to an island, Mon Ami, and whatever. It's okay, this is fine. But it's a little bit redundant and frustrating, because I know it's not going to happen. I know she's not going to say yes. It just kind of feels like we're going through the motions a little bit. But of course, we're all going to still be involved in wanting to take down Homelander. So I guess my overall feeling for these 2 episodes would be, there's some good stuff in here. There's some good Boys-esque stuff. There's some good needle drops. What's the Chumpawampa? No, Chumpawampa? The I Get Knocked Down song, right? That song coming up at the end when Soldier Boy sits back up. Inspired choice, right? Good stuff. Little like flourishes like that are very, very good. But I guess I would say that it still kind of feels like these first 2 episodes, well, perfectly entertaining. They suffer a little bit from both having to be a full 60 minutes long, so it feels like we're getting some extra scenes with characters that don't necessarily do that much. Like, feel a little bit wheel spinning at times with some of the conversations between them, right? And I'm thinking the more like personal relationshipy scenes between Frenchie and Kimiko at a certain point, Huey and Annie, and some of the other things. So I would say that, and I would also say that it does feel that we're still kind of cleaning up some of the things that season 5 left dangling. Now, don't get me wrong, like they've set some other stuff up here, and as per usual, all the stuff with Homelander's like insecurities and like him introducing Soldier Boy to everyone, and Soldier Boy asking for the Manhattan, and the president being like, "Oh, I'll get you milk, sir," and he's like, "No, not milk. No, I'm not a child. I'll also take a Manhattan." Like that looking for acceptance from his father, because he's always wanted acceptance, right? That's like the big thing he's always wanted for his ego, is he wants to be loved. And like that's pathetic, and it's very in character, and it feels like it's very in line with everything we've seen from him throughout the show. So moments like that, really digging still, right? Homelander making the deep piss himself in fear, sure, yeah, it's all right. But I guess maybe there's just maybe a few things that they're kind of like padding the runtime out with, where I'm like, do you know what? I've seen some of this stuff enough at this point that I don't know if we need to necessarily spend as much time in all of it as we do. And there's also a whole thing, like, I mean, episode 2 starts with a whole funeral scene for A-Train, and they blame it on Starlight, and like Ashley's engaged to this other like pastor character, and it's a whole thing, and he's doing a whole song and dance, and it's talking about like it's basically just in the evangelical kind of like pastor thing where he's like getting people to say amen and shout and whatever. It's it's doing its shtick, right? And I guess maybe that's the only thing here, is that like some of these 2 episodes still kind of feel a little bit like, the shtick, as opposed to genuine, like, oh, we're really getting the ball running with the plot. But I don't want to sound like too negative either, though, because they were still very easy watches, and episode 1 in particular felt really nicely focused because it was all about getting them out of the prison. Episode 2 maybe waffled a little bit more in that case, and there's obviously some mistrust here. No one trusts Butcher, and rightfully no one trusts Butcher. Why would they trust Butcher? Also, Butcher lied to Victoria Newman's husband and said that Homelander killed her, and everyone in the room who witnessed it is like, So yeah, so they're all kind of having to live a little bit in fear from Butcher just killing them with these big snake things, which maybe there's a nice parallel there, this idea that he's become more like Homelander, and there can be something there with that. There's also, though, that moment where Homelander says to Butcher, I have to admit you're the only person who's ever challenged me, which I thought was interesting. But yeah, what did it take for him to challenge him? It took him really giving up everything he is, his humanity. Like, his wife would probably be horrified with what he's turned into by now. And it was all about her in the early days. And so, yeah, he has a way of twisting things, which we'll see how that kind of plays out. A final moment of redemption, perhaps, to perhaps save Huey in the end, maybe, to give him his like heroic moment at the end. I mean, we'll see. We'll see if they go down that path and do it. I did also laugh as well, actually. Soldier Boy found them because Butcher rented a car under the name Don T. Biaka. So, which also made me laugh. It's a cheap pop, but every time they do something with him loving that word, I'm into it. So I cannot complain. I think that's about all my thoughts though for these first 2 episodes. Like, obviously there's little things that they're setting up and they're sprinkling in here or there for later down the line, and whatnot. But it still feels like it's still The Boys. The thing I've heard though from the early reviews, from the reviewers who got to see the season, is the back half of the season is really good and like really does a good job sending off everything. So it's like the first half is kind of typical boys season. The second half is like, okay, now we're in the end game and we're actually going to do all this. So in that sense, I'm glad we got the first two together, just so that we're kind of closer to that more special half of the season potentially. But we'll see if that actually plays out and can kind of really like all coalesce. Can we actually have all that stuff come together? Will we all enjoy watching the deep dive? Will we all enjoy like Homelander finally getting comeuppance? Maybe Butcher doing something heroic like and selfless by the end? You know, could we see Maeve show up for something? Because, you know, she's not actually dead. We know that for a fact. So maybe she'll show up to help in the end. But as it is, like, you know, I'm not like either, like, it's not the best episodes of the show has ever done. A perfectly fine start, and I'm excited to see where it goes. But it's still very much typical The Boys right now, these first two episodes. But just a little bit of that, like anyone can die because it's the final season mantra. But it kind of feels almost like too structured in the sense where, like, okay, he gave us one at the end of episode 1 with A-Train to really sell the idea, but that almost convinces me that everyone else is safe until the last, like, 2 episodes, right? You got your one early to make us all on edge, but now I'm convinced that everyone's actually fine until later. So, you know, but, you know, I did like MM being a hero and, like, saving the girl who really didn't deserve. Like, the idea that all of her crows, she used to have 10 crows, the Countess of Crows, but, like, the cat lady, Sheline, like 8, most of them, so she's not got any left. And it was really funny when he bags the crows up and he puts it in the other room, and she's like, oh shit, I have nothing else. I only have the crows. Once it's just me and the opponent, I've got nothing. The crows are kind of my whole thing. So, you know, that was kind of nice seeing that he let her go and kind of sympathize with her a little bit. Some nice humanizing moments. So I hope MM gets a nice ending, because he's been through the ringer in the show and kind of deserves a little bit, I think. So, yeah, there you go. I mean, I think that'll do for this first week. Honestly, it was kind of tough, like, fitting in the double episode this week, especially since I kind of got the day wrong that it was meant to launch. It was out a day earlier than I thought it was. So I had to kind of squeeze it in kind of in a weird, awkward position, but hopefully you had fun with my ramblings and talking about what I'm hoping for the rest of the season. I guess the thing I really want more than anything is to feel a strong sense of direction and, like, a good sort of thrust, you know, in terms of, like, pacing. Like, once we really get things set up and it feels like we're valuably using every minute that we've got left to really give us something special to conclude the story. That's what I would like, you know, once we get into the rest of these episodes. And they're setting up some pieces, but it's not necessarily, like, wowing me too much yet. So we'll see how it goes. But let me know what you thought of these first 2 episodes of The Boys in the comments below. I did obviously talk about both episodes kind of in the same amount of time I usually talk about one, so obviously I didn't talk about everything. By all means, bring up anything in the comments that you think is important for later, or it was a good moment you liked, or what you complain about even. So thank you very much. You can support everything over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. Helps out a bunch if you do. Thanks to everyone who already does. Check out the movie channel for all the Mail Fuzz movie podcasts. But that is me. Thank you once again for watching or listening. I do appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?